Okay, so here we got a 2210 John Deere with a 210 loader on it. Nice little unit, about 20 horse I think, something like that. The biggest problem with these tractors is the owners. And they think that this tractor is somehow a 50 horse tractor with a 3-point hitch that's able to auger holes and run a plow and lift up small buildings. And that's not what these things are for, and you'll decrease the life very quickly when you start doing that. Twisting things like the loaders, because the hydraulics will keep going. I've had this one, I've been servicing this one for a while. We welded a plate on there with hooks on it so that he could lift a lot of heavy things that he shouldn't. And the thing that happens is this is an older one, so there's no emissions on it. So when you start loading it down, you start creating black smoke because the engine's not turning fast enough. It bogs down. The governor's telling it to throw a bunch of fuel in there. It can't burn it. So you get a lot of black smoke coming out the tailpipe, which in that turn comes around and gets sucked into the air filter and clogs out the air filter and starts choking down the engine. Really, if you're creating black smoke, you're doing something that you shouldn't. And if you're cutting grass and you're hitting a pile or you get stuck, sure, that's fine. But if you're augering holes or something into other than an 8-inch hole in sand, and you constantly get black smoke, it's not big enough. Stop it. But anyway, we're doing a full service on this one, so that involves greasing the loader. So basically every point that pivots has a grease fitting. So the cylinders on both ends and on the bucket as well. There are grease fittings on the steering, and this applies to other model of tractors as well. Now there's also grease fitting in the drive shaft that comes through here. There's a little access hole and you can't see it, but back there is actually a grease fitting, and we've already replaced this one because people forget about that one. All 3 bearings on the deck, the blades themselves have grease fittings, and then there's oil in this gear box at the front, and there's usually a plug kind of a third of the way up, and that needs to be full of oil. Check and make sure that these bolts are nice and tight because these will rattle loose, especially when the blades get worn and they start becoming uneven. Okay, so for sharpening blades, you can just take a grinder and clean it up, or you can put it on a bench grinder and run it back and forth like this. Don't leave any blue spots, and don't put too sharp of an edge on it because it'll just wear off and be dull again right away. You want as much meat left with as sharp of a blade as you can. And then once they get down to wearing down that much, we're going to run these one more season, but basically order blades for next year. What happens is they become out of balance, and then you start taking your bearings out, so be careful of that. The deck, if it starts to peel the paint, if you want to clean it up, which we've done before, is basically just aesthetics, because it's rotting 10 times worse from the bottom than it is from the top. If you don't clean the grass off on the inside every time, or you put it away wet, you'll start eating your deck out. Now this is still a stamped deck, so you can see if it's welded on the corners, it's got sharp folds on it, then it's a much better quality deck. These are rounded, so you know it's still a stamped deck. The sun does a lot of damage to these because they have a lot of plastic in them. So I've had to replace this handle, the parking brake release handle, and we've also had to replace the turn signal switch because the weather gets at it. And this is actually the 3rd seat that's on it because the weather just does tons of sun damage. You can see the gas cap there. The fuel filter is right here, and basically shut the tap off, take this off, replace the filter, clean it, replace the filter, get started a couple threads, open the tap again until fuel comes out, and then just open the tap again, and you should be able to bleed it just by starting it. There's no bleeding procedure for the pump itself. There's your engine oil filter, and the hydraulic filter is at the back and the bottom there for the transmission, I believe. There's a screen at the front here that you pull up. Make sure you clean that every time you use it. Get the grass off there. Check your coolant, check your lights, check your battery. Rad hoses, make sure that they're in good shape. Check the fan belt for tension as well. Check that air filter. Like I said, it gets a lot of black smoke in there. Have one on hand and clean them out. Check your coolant for how potent it is. Make sure that that doesn't freeze up. Don't forget to check your front axle oil, which is completely separate. Some tractors will have a level on the final drive, but these ones are connected, so this level does everything. There's also a grease fitting on the pivot on the axle. Don't forget about that grease fitting. And if you're looking at buying a used tractor like this and the front tires are worn 10 times worse than the back tires and they're all cracked, you know that they're putting way too much in the loader, and something to keep in mind that it's been doing a lot of heavy lifting and work. Not only does it stress the loaders and the front axle, it's also the drive line, oil getting hot, hydrostats getting worn, things like that, just to keep in mind. And the biggest thing is if it's got a fresh coat of paint, be very, very wary. So, yeah, but you guys know about that. When your customer asks you to put a weight together for the 3-point hitch, you know that he's asking too much for it because he keeps picking up the ass end of the tractor. But anyway, there is your fill level for your oil. And I hate these things because if they're empty, you can't tell whether it's over full or under because this glass, a dipstick would be much, much better, but basically check it with your equipment all the way down, so your 3-point hitch down, your loader down, and then have somebody watch or have somebody raise everything up and see if you can see the fluid line come down. If you can see that line, you know that you got lots of oil in there. The level should be straight across with everything down on the ground. Other than that, check tire pressures. We also replaced the wheels on this one, which was kind of weird. The setup that we got was these pins, and I got 2 of them. Basically this was what was on there, and you can see how worn that is through the wheels, so your wheels start bouncing around. But this, I had to cut this off of the arm here and then drill a hole through the back, 5/16 hole. I welded the new pin on it and then stuck a grade 8 bolt through here and then tightened that on there. I didn't see any other way to do it, so that was kind of a pain, but I think this is the first time these wheels have been replaced. Other than that, some tractors will have grease fittings on the clutch pedal and the brake pedals. This one does not. You generally don't have to replace your hydraulic fluid. Replace your filter every 500 hours. Replace your engine oil filter every season. Even if you only put, oil is cheap, it only takes a couple liters. And I think that's it. So good little tractors, just don't expect too much of them. So happy trails.